Hello, coaches. Welcome back to another episode of Coach Better Spotlight. Today, I am chatting with Lindsay Deacon and Angela Harkness, authors of the EduCoach Survival Guide and instructional coaches in Portland, Oregon, USA. This Spotlight episode focuses on the first step in becoming a successful instructional coach. In the full-length podcast episode, we also chat about working with school leaders, how to effectively support teams, and the importance of building coaching relationships and having fun in your role. Lindsay and Angela share tons of stories from their own coaching experience in Portland area school districts, as well as unique scenarios from their book, The EduCoach Survival Guide. To hear the full episode, subscribe to Coach Better wherever you get your podcasts. Today's conversation is another great window into the learning that happens inside the Coach Certificate Mentorship Program. Wherever you are in building a coaching culture in your school, the coach will give you the strategy, skills, and tools you need to make coaching a success. This academic year-long online course and mentorship program will empower you to confidently apply instructional coaching strategies in any situation, from building a coaching program to having coaching conversations to being a leader in your school community. Registration for our next global cohort opens on the 21st of February and closes on the 14th of March. Find out more and join the waiting list at edurolearning.com/coach. Welcome back to another episode of the Coach Better podcast. I am super excited to be here today with Lindsay and Angela, authors of the EduCoach Survival Guide. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
Hi, thank you.
It is my pleasure. I know you have an interesting story on how you started, how you got to know each other and how you started thinking about writing this book, and then your story about writing the book. So I want to get started by hearing about your individual journeys into coaching, into education, and then hearing the story of the book.
Sure. Our journey is so together. It's not so individual.
No problem.
We got put together when we were new teachers at the same school, and it was like way across town. We're in Portland, and it was so random because it was like, well, where do you live? Where do you live? Where do you live? And we lived like a block apart. So we decided to carpool to work every day, in addition to teaching next door to each other with like an adjoining room. So we started as teachers, and then I became a coach of that building. And then Angela and I, we moved on to different schools, but then we were both coaches at different schools. So we
found that we were having similar issues as far as like we had the basics of coaching and like the coaching cycle, the process, you know, from all the greats, the coaching greats. And we were looking for like in the moment responses for problems that we were both having, either with kind of our coaching practice individually or with teachers or with teams or with admin. And I believe we were at a Lady Gaga concert in Las Vegas. And you said, dude, let's write a book.
Yeah, let's write a book.
Let's write a book.
Let's just do it.
Let's write a book. And we literally were like in the airport, like because laptops out.
We were Googling. I mean, I was like, especially because I was coaching coaches for our district. And so I'm hearing the same things come up every day. And some days I'd be solving the same problem 4 times in a row. And so I was Googling like coaching survival guide. Somebody else must have written this. I don't want to have to write this. Somebody else did. But we couldn't really find anything. And I think we asked Jim Knight, you know, and he said, I don't think anything like that exists. And so we just said, well, what does it take to write a book? Let's do it.
Oh, what does it take?
And you never look back, and you're so grateful that you had that opportunity. Yes. I totally get this, like, feeling of answering the same question 4 times in a row. There must be something about coaching, maybe I'm exaggerating, but something about coaching that is so isolating that everyone's experiencing the same problems, but yet we don't know that we're all having the same, you know, it's really fascinating how that works. Maybe it's because, you know, schools only have 1 or 2 coaches per district or building or whatever it is, or maybe it's because there's a lack of community around the particular position. I'm not sure, but that hearing the same problem again and again, that's what gives me all of my fodder for my YouTube videos, for my Instagram stories, because it's just, I hear the same questions again and again, and where are we getting those answers? So I really appreciate that it came from the experiences that you were having and hearing from other coaches. And I remember when we talked earlier, we were talking about, for coaches, until you get yourself right, you can't expect others to change. And therefore the question is, what do coaches need to know and understand about themselves in their role to be successful as coaches?
Oh.
Role clarity. I think that's the number one thing that usually comes up before any of the other scenarios is, as a coach, do I actually know what I'm supposed to be doing every day? And what what coaching practices are going to have the most impact on student achievement? Because it's really easy to get sucked into a lot of things, or even just sit on your laptop and do a lot of emails. But we know fundamentally that doesn't actually impact student achievement or change in schools. And so when coaches really narrow down role clarity with themselves, get it publicized to the teachers, get it clear with the principal, and it's formalized, then they're able and freed up to do a lot of the other work. So I think is that our first?
I think so. Yeah. Coach knew to wrote it down so I wouldn't have to remember. But yeah, that's Coach new to building is like the first one. That was one actually I wrote because I did move to a new district, and really kind of knowing my strengths and weaknesses, or strengths and areas of growth within that role, I think was really important. And that was my third building. So I really had refined what I was doing at that point. So,
and I think we've experienced, because we talked to a lot of coaches when we're putting this book together and collecting strategies. These aren't just like our stories and our strategies. They're from a lot of different people in different places. And so it's not necessarily a one size fits all approach. But the idea is that if a coach really knows what they're supposed to be doing, and they also have a network of other coaches or other people to talk to, then they can kind of start talking about the work they do with teachers, with teams, with the principal. Do you have your favorite scenario is number one? Or do you have, what's your favorite?
Well, I most recently applicable is returning from maternity leave, which I was literally able to write as it was happening. So that was kind of the most real for me.
And I think that was like a final add-on to the book, because we were like, this is actually coming up a lot. I like the district I was working in, we had something like 5 or 6 coaches who were all coming back from maternity leave in the same month at different schools. And it was wild how much it really impacted their world as coaches. So we just thought we should write a scenario about it.
Literally, that one just like flew in at the last minute.
Yeah.
So that's in there.
Mine is coaches having a hard time liking a client.
Oh, you got a good story for that one.
Which, I mean, I've seen third party a lot too, but even for myself, that was a thing where sometimes, I mean, like you want to like the people you coach, right? Even if you don't feel it right away, at the end of the day, like you want to feel invested in them as people. And I had a teacher where she just was that teacher in the building, where I think a lot of people, kind of avoided her in the hallway or in meetings. But when I became a coach, I remember thinking, I have to put all that aside because this isn't about me. It's not about my feelings. It's not about the culture in the building. This is about this person and the students in her classroom. And I went in and I watched her teach, and it was actually really fun. And we started meeting for coffee before school and like talking about her practice. So I kind of went from like kind of not really liking her at all as a person to her being somebody, even now we don't work in the same building. And like we can text each other and laugh. So I think it's really important that we're able to reframe like how we feel about our clients.
Yep. And you were able to highlight some of her work for the staff.
Yeah.
And that kind of put her on a platform in a way, and kind of shifted the way some folks maybe preconceived notions they had about who she was.
Because in buildings, a lot of times there's like this perception of like, who's the good teacher, who's the bad teacher, that kind of thing. And I think that we as coaches, we have to that's the whole point. We can't be judgmental.
Can't that. Yep.
It's not about us.
We don't have business doing that.
So you guys said a million things that I want to unpack there. And I think the first thing that is really interesting, you started with role clarity, which I completely agree with. And I think sometimes that can be really challenging because you don't always walk into a school with the role clearly defined, right? So then you're doing the definition and you're doing it potentially in collaboration or like for a principal or administrator who doesn't necessarily have that same level of clarity. And how do you, in your expertise with all the coaches that you've worked with in your experience, how do you help that school leader understand your role when they maybe were put in the position to have a coach, but they never were coached, or they never supervised a coach before, or, you know, it's a new position in the school? Because I think that is really challenging. And I think many coaches are in the position they're in because either they were successful with what they're doing in their classroom, and so then they got elevated to support others. And that's a completely different skill set. Just because you can do something with your own kids does not mean you can do it with 15 other teachers at the same time. Totally. Or because they're like just super passionate, helpful, like over the top, want to do more. And so then both of those things, you can get like so overwhelmed with so many different pieces of the role that it is really hard to actually find clarity. So can we talk a little bit more about that, your strategies, your advice? Where are you coming from when you think about trying to seek that clarity for yourself? And really, I think importantly, with your school leader.
Totally. So a couple things come to mind. The first one that comes to mind is the coach admin partnership agreements.
So we have like a tool in the back of our book that's just basically developing partnership agreements.
And so it's a lot about communication and establishing your firms.
What's okay, what's not okay.
Yeah, and like where you're expected to spend your time, how you're expected to spend your time, what you will and won't share with admin, data you will or will not be collecting. So I think nailing those down really early is really important. And sometimes you really have to advocate for that time with the administrator, which there's also
we got a scenario on that too.
Holding that time and space. And then brain fart.
I was going to say that, in my experience working with a lot of different administrators or watching coaches with administrators, that, for all the best of intentions, an administrator might not have been trained in coaching at all, but they've been given the FTE for this position. And so they sort of have an idea, and it's really the coach's responsibility to educate and coach up to the administrator. You can't expect when you go and you become a coach, no matter how much you know, that your administrator also has a clear understanding, because they have so many other things they have to do and learn about. They can't just be focused only on the coaching role. So in that time together, when you have a regular meeting, those are your times to really sit down and say, like, these are the high impact practices. This is what I should be spending my time doing, and providing the literature and the research. Should an administrator have time to peruse that?
And that was what I was thinking of was, and I've seen many versions online, and one of the first versions I saw you created when you were a coach, that little coaching menu that like you put in my box. I'm like, oh, hey, thank you. And every year I've created a version of a coaching menu for teachers. And so it's just a little one-page document, virtual or piece of paper I put in their box or hand to them that is like a little resource for what I can do, what we can do as coaches. And so that's been a really handy just kind of piece to give folks in the moment, here it is.
And keeping in mind that, like, we definitely understand that the work that between coaches and teachers is confidential, but how can you showcase some of that to the administrator so that they really understand the good work that coaches and teachers are doing? And so I think, like, absolutely asking teachers permission, like, hey, could I like share this with principal, let them know what you're doing, or let them know what to look for next time they pop into your classroom. That can just be another way of educating them.
And that is all part of the teacher coach agreements, partnership agreements.
Yes, true.
So you can find that in there as well.
Awesome. I do want to talk about teachers next too. And I know we skipped kind of ahead to principals there, but one more question about that principals piece. And I really appreciate the coach and principals partnership agreements that you're talking about. So this is now maybe a little more like on the personal side. How do you help coaches who know that they got hired and they got hired for their role, but maybe they feel still a little bit of that imposter syndrome. Like the same that you both have said is like, you have to educate your administrator on your position. I talk to so many coaches who are like, but my leader doesn't know what I'm supposed to be doing and they're not giving me the right kind of tasks. And I'm like, well, have you told them what you should be doing? And they don't feel like they can. And that's something we can work through on a, person-to-person conversation, but from a larger scale, how do you help coaches feel empowered enough to actually tackle that? Is it a matter of just having the piece of paper and going in and having that third thing that you like, look, I read this book, this is what they recommend, and I'd like to talk about that with you?
I think that's exactly what I would say. Like, just quote that.
Yes. Well, I think, and then another thing, actually, when I was working at one of my previous sites, and actually Lindsay was my coach at one previous site, and I was just kind of feeling like the work I was doing was invisible. It wasn't having any impact. And she's like, but wait, do you believe it's having impact? And I was like, well, yeah. And she's like, then there you go. Then it is. And so just kind of having someone reframe something for you, like just because you feel or think something or you're perceived some way doesn't mean you are that thing. And then I do think having, even if it's just for comfort, like having something, even just if I'm in a conversation and maybe, I don't know, my brain goes blank, which it does a lot after you have a baby, I guess that happens. So even just having that in front of me to be like, oh yeah, I do that too. So.
And I would also say one of the best pieces of advice I got when I very first started coaching years ago was my mentor had said to block out time every single day for professional reading. And that was, things were happening in the morning and I'm out there not really knowing what I'm doing as a new coach. But then I would sit down and I'd crack open Jim Knight's Instructional Coaching and I'd read a section and go, okay, I'm going to try to apply this, or I'm going to think through like my day on this lens. And then when I met with the principal, I had a language in order to like, talk about the work that I was doing.
And
I think that's kind of, go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, if you are, hired to be a coach, there was intention behind that. There was thought, there was a hiring process, there was money. And if a school puts money behind something, it's important. And so just kind of reminding yourself that you were hired by people that wanted you to do this thing.
Totally.
And so you were there, you have a purpose. And sometimes it's just a matter of like, just remembering that.
Yeah.
Coaches do really work.
Yes. I think having that concrete foundation of what the role can be, what you think it should be, and really having that solidified in your own mind. And maybe that is just pointing to a piece of paper document. Maybe it's writing up your own document. That's so foundational, because then from there you define all the work that you do. And that's how you can say yes or no to a new task that a principal assigns to you. I think sometimes we get into the situation where we're just so excited to be in a new role, we don't think about the importance of laying that foundation first. And we kind of go, jump both feet first, and we find ourselves maybe 6 months in, oh my gosh, I'm doing 5 hours of duty a day. I can't keep up with this. Like, this is not going to work. And then you got to like backpedal. And where's your resource that you're coming to because now you're at the point where you're having to have a difficult conversation and you've let it build up over months and months and months. So it's not just the 5 hours of recess a day. It's also the exam supervision or the covering classes or whatever it might be. Now you've got to go in and have this reset conversation. And that is scary. Like, if you do it on the first week of coming to your job and you're like, I'd just like to articulate what the expectations are for me. And here's what I'm thinking about, like that. Okay. That's not so bad. But, 6 months in, or even sometimes people, a year in, sometimes even 2 years in, like, I don't know how to get back. I don't know how to pull this back. And like having that reset conversation, you need that foundation. I feel more comfortable if you have that foundation to look at and say, okay, this is what really this job should be. Help me make a clear list of expectations that's reasonable that I should be doing. You can always go into it with a collaborative mindset that this is where I think I should be going. What do you think about this as my job? Okay, if this is what we agree my job description is, what are the things I should and should not be doing? Like there's lots of ways to have that conversation that isn't confrontational, but I think it gets really scary when it's gone on for time and you don't feel like you can have it.
Well, I think going off of that, it reminded me of a couple years ago, we had my school had a really strong instructional leadership team. And so I would set goals based on the goals of the instructional leadership team and how I can help the school with those. And it was at a time where it was testing and duty. And so when I went to my principal, I said, I set my goals based on the goals of the instructional leadership team. What would you like me to reprioritize to meet these? Because I'm being asked to do this. How do you want me to spend my time? And so that having that foundation, having those goals set based on goals that are important to the school, that kind of gave me more leverage to really do the work I'm supposed to do.
Yes. And I think it is a lot about like framing the conversation. So it's not an attack on what you've been asked to do, but more, let's clarify this together and feel like we both know where this is supposed to go. So we can both agree when it's going well or when it's not. Awesome. Thank you. I think that's going to be super helpful for lots of people. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you are ready to develop your coaching practice over the next academic year, please join us for the next cohort of The Coach. Wherever you are in building a coaching culture in your school, The Coach will give you the strategies, skills, and tools that you need to make coaching a success. This academic year-long online course and mentorship program will empower you to confidently apply instructional coaching strategies in any situation, from building a coaching program to having a coaching conversation to being a leader in your school community. Registration for our next global cohort opens on the 21st of February and closes on the 14th of March. We facilitate only one cohort each year so we can offer individualized support for each participant. Now is your chance to be part of a global cohort of passionate and engaged learners, to leverage 40 weeks of in-depth coaching content with practical challenges to build your coaching skills, and to reflect on your practice for the entire academic year with a mentor. Become a certified Eduro Learning instructional coach today. Head over to edurolearning.com/coach to find out more. Here at Eduro, we provide customized online professional learning for educators at the intersection of technology, coaching, and leadership. Our mission is to empower the relentless learner in you to embrace your inner leader and make a bigger impact in your school setting. Join our Coach Better Facebook group and connect with us on social media at Eduro Learning for more great resources at the intersection of technology, coaching, and leadership. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode, and we'll see you next time.